By 1942, the once invincible German Panzer divisions were on the ropes, their strategic reserves gasping for breath. The Allies, rolling out tougher, more lethal tanks, stood ready to snatch the armored crown right off the Nazis' heads. In a desperate gambit to turn the tide, Adolf Hitler yanked Heinz Guderian, the brain behind the blitzkrieg, out of retirement. With a mammoth task ahead, Guderian, shoulder to shoulder with Albert Speer, the Minister for Armaments, kicked off a daring revamp of Germany's tank assembly lines. They cut loose any project that couldn't sprint to the front lines, no questions asked. Just as they were about to drop the axe on the Jagdpanzer IV project, Hitler himself barged in. The Führer, betting big on intel from similar war machines, pegged this beastly tank destroyer as the ace up the Reich sleeve in the tank warfare showdown. Its iron-hard armor and sleek profile made it a fearsome foe on any battlefield. Packing a high-velocity 75mm cannon, it could punch through enemy armor from miles away, while its V-shaped hull shrugged off incoming fire with ease. For Hitler, this tank destroyer was his trump card. Despite Speer and Guderian sounding the alarm over the strain this monster would put on Panzer IV production, Hitler wouldn't budge. He slammed the production pedal to the metal. And just like that, the Jagdpanzer IV was hurled into the furnace of war across multiple fronts, as yet another testament to Hitler's erratic military gambles. 3 years into the conflict they ignited, the German military found itself backed into a corner, wrestling with the urgent need for beefier armored bruisers to take on the increasingly tough tanks of the Allies and the Soviet Union. The furnace of war, fueled by desperation and the breakneck speed of tech advances, was ripe for innovation. Against this backdrop, the blueprint for the Jagdpanzer IV, a beast of a tank destroyer, was drafted, aiming to tip the scales back in favor of the German Wehrmacht. By 1942, the German armored divisions, once the undisputed champs of blitzkrieg, faced a harsh new truth. The steel titans that had once thundered across Europe, leaving adversaries in the dust, were now getting a run for their money by the Allies' heavier and slicker armor. The bloodbath at Stalingrad and the armored slugfest on the Eastern Front hammered home the dire need for war machines capable of knocking out the dreaded armored behemoths like the Soviet T-34. In 41, the Wehrmacht's arsenal was failing against the T-34, and the scramble that ensued the following year cobbled together a mishmash of new gear aimed at standing up to the Soviet juggernaut. The clock was ticking, resources were scarce, and there was no time to cook up a brand new anti-tank from scratch. They had an arsenal of Soviet field guns nabbed from previous engagements and a stockpile of outdated armored vehicles gathering dust. The solution was obvious: slap the massive Russian guns on the older Panzer chassis in stock. During its blitz into the Soviet Union, Germany had snagged a boatload of high-velocity 75mm and 88mm cannons, packing enough punch to send the dreaded T-34 tank to the scrapyard. The issue was that these big guns were slow movers, struggling to keep pace with the armored cavalry. Welding these cannons onto the bodies of aging Panzer units could provide quick yet remarkable solutions to Germany's armor problems. Out of this necessity, a slew of designs hit the drawing board, from the Panzerjäger series to the Marder line of tank destroyers. Each iteration nudged the German military closer to their goal. Yet, they were still batting at flies with issues like snail-paced movement, paper-thin armor, and firepower that just didn't hit hard enough. On May 18, 1942, the German Minister for Arms and Munitions threw down the gauntlet, calling on the Heereswaffenamt to roll out a new self-propelled anti-tank gun, tailor-made to put the Soviet tanks out of business. The blueprint called for merging the battle-tested chassis of the Panzer IV with a hefty anti-tank gun, all wrapped up in a sleek, low-slung superstructure. This was the birth of the Jagdpanzer IV's mission, a relentless tank hunter. But the road to its mass production was anything but straight. When Heinz Guderian, the mastermind behind the blitzkrieg strategy, was called back to jumpstart Germany's tank forces, he walked into a storm. The German war machine was spread too thin, juggling multiple new tanks and armored vehicle designs. Ambitious, yes, but a tall order under the war's strain. Together with Albert Speer, the Minister for Armaments and War Production, Guderian set their sights on cutting through the clutter. They aimed to sharpen production focus on machines that could hit the assembly line running. Initially, the Jagdpanzer IV didn't get much love from Guderian or Speer. They saw it as a wild card that could mess with the Panzer IV's rollout, the iron backbone of Germany's Panzer might. Plus, with the Stug 3 tank destroyer already proving its mettle on the field, they pitched for ramping up its numbers instead. In their eyes, Rolling out a newbie, especially a turretless one, would just jam up the gears, offering no real edge over the veterans. Adolf Hitler suddenly stepped in. Charmed by the Strug 3's tank-killing spree, Hitler threw his weight behind the Jagdpanzer IV, dreaming it up as the Panzer IV's successor, packing a more devastating anti-tank wallop. Brushing aside Guderian and Speer's well-reasoned pushback, Hitler ordered the Jagdpanzer IV's mass production into full throttle. His decree was unquestionable. This new tank destroyer was to lead the charge, banking on its potential to shift the tides of war. From its inception to its deployment in the thick of battle, the Jagdpanzer IV's journey was a saga of triumphs, hurdles, and a laser focus on tackling the tactical curveballs thrown by World War II's ever-evolving front lines. Engineers developing the Jagdpanzer IV smartly chose the Panzer IV chassis, combining tactical and practical advantages. This decision allowed them to leverage established manufacturing techniques and existing parts, efficiently enhancing the tank's destroying capabilities. The genius of the Jagdpanzer IV lay in its superstructure. Ditching the traditional turret for a fixed-gun setup, engineers shaved its profile down to a harder-to-spot silhouette, a must for a hunter lurking in the shadows, ready to pounce on enemy tanks. This design wasn't just a nod to stealth. It was a calculated blend of tactical savvy and manufacturing smarts, aiming to roll out a low, tough anti-tank specialist. By going turretless, the Jagdpanzer IV boasted a lower profile, making it a tough target to spot and even tougher to hit, a key trait for a machine designed to ambush its prey. Plus, this setup streamlined the assembly line, a vital factor when resources were tight and the demand for war machines was through the roof. Packing more armor up front than its turreted cousins, the Jagdpanzer IV could take a punch and stay standing, especially in defensive setups, where it could blend into the background, lying in wait for the enemy. However, its fixed gun meant that to take a shot, it had to move its whole body, a clear disadvantage in the heat of battle, or when threats came from multiple angles. This limitation shaped its battlefield role, demanding sharp tactical moves to play to its strengths and soften its weaknesses. The Jagdpanzer IV's superstructure was a fortress on tracks, particularly at the front, where 80mm of sloped armor stood as a bulwark against incoming rounds. The design wasn't just about piling on more metal. It was the product of meticulous engineering to bounce shots off its hide, a leap forward from the upright armor plates of yesteryear's war machines. At its core, the Jagdpanzer IV was built to be a tank's worst nightmare. Initially armed with a 7.5cm Pak 39 L43 cannon, and later upgraded to the Pak 42 L48, it was a predator designed to pierce through enemy armor like a hot knife through butter. Selecting these cannons struck a fine line between delivering a knockout blow, ensuring they were readily available, and fitting them onto the Jagdpanzer's tight quarters without tipping the scales or bogging it down. The Pak 42 L70 model in particular made the front end heavy, dubbed Guderian's duck for its awkward handling over rough patches. The sprint to production, spurred by Hitler's pressing timelines, meant navigating a minefield of material shortages, dwindling skilled hands, and the constant shadow of Allied bombers. These challenges sparked ingenuity in design. For instance, steel replaced rubber on road wheels as supplies thinned out, and trimming down the number of return rollers shaved off some resource demands without kneecapping the machine's agility. This drive for efficiency led to breakthroughs like the use of giant jigsaw puzzle-like armor plates, streamlining the build process while beefing up the tank's shell. Despite hitting the battlefield years after the first shots of 1939 rang out, by 1944, the Jagdpanzer IV carved out a reputation for stellar performance and reliability, holding its own against Allied tanks in the final chapters of World War II. This cutting-edge tank destroyer rolled out with both the Panzer and SS Panzer divisions, making its mark from the beaches of Normandy to the frostbitten Eastern Front against Soviet forces. In the heat of battle, the Jagdpanzer IV's standout features, like its ironclad frontal armor and sleek profile, made it a tough nut for enemy gunners to crack. These advantages, along with the brute force of its main cannon, meant it thrived in the art of ambush, dealing devastating blows to enemy tanks before melting back into the shadows. Its design philosophy was clear: hit hard, stay low, and become the bane of Allied and Soviet tank crews. Yet, for all its strengths, the Jagdpanzer IV wasn't without its drawbacks. In addition to its lack of a turret, models sporting the lengthier Pak 42 L70 cannon found themselves bogged down in tougher terrains. SS Oberscharführer Rudolf Roy became a legend behind the controls of the Jagdpanzer IV, showcasing the machine's prowess by knocking out dozens of Allied tanks as part of the 12th SS Panzer Jäger Battalion within the legendary 12th SS Panzer Division. Roy's final act unfolded on December 17, 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium, the Third Reich's last major throw at the dice on the Western Front. His end came not in a blaze of glory from tank combat, but from the silent precision of an American sniper, catching Roy off guard as he surveyed the battlefield from his Jagdpanzer IV. When pressed into roles beyond its design, subbing for tanks or assault guns in the infantry's vanguard, the Jagdpanzer IV stumbled, a square peg forced into a round hole. As the war waned, Germany, with its tank ranks thinned, leaned heavily on the Jagdpanzer IV, often the only option left to stave off Allied and Soviet pushes into the Reich's heartlands and its Eastern European strongholds. While it was a thorn in the side of the Soviet T-34s, its late arrival to the war theater meant it could do little to sway the outcome, especially against the Red Army's relentless post-Stalingrad pushback. Yet, the tale of the Jagdpanzer IV didn't end with the war's closing chapters. Several units found a new lease on life with the Romanian army, rechristened as the TAS-T4, and remained in service until the dawn of the 1950s, when they finally bowed to obsolescence. Today, the legacy of the Jagdpanzer IV is being unearthed, quite literally, from battlegrounds across Europe, with restoration efforts breathing new life into these steel sentinels, ensuring their storied past and engineering marvels secure a place in European museum collections, standing as silent witnesses to the tumult and valor of World War II.